I'm Judge Karlos Finley, and I'm running for mayor of Mobile, Alabama, my hometown. I'm going to speak to you today how I keep up with my social wellness. Social wellness is an aspect that, quite frankly, encompasses all of the other areas of wellness. And I think that when we look at wellness as a whole, all of these areas are certainly related to one another. So we need to be well in all of the disciplines of wellness. But when we talk about social wellness specifically, we have to speak to the relationship of individuals and groups of individuals within our social construct, how we interact, why we interact with one another. And as a sociology minor in the area of business organization as an undergraduate degree, I've had some opportunity to study this area. But more so, it's the practicality of it that's most important when we interact with one another. And you'll see several pictures behind me. Those are all family members and now ancestors who have moved on, but they were all instrumental in advancing the social wellness of our city and in many of the places that they travel. On my top right, you'll see a picture of my mother, who was a history teacher. So she taught high school history here in the city of Mobile, and her big hit was always about teaching children to be involved in their communities. How not to necessarily be, very inactive or passive, but how to be very active and how to be engaged in the community to make it all that we feel like it should be. And then underneath her, you'll see a picture of lawyer Vernon Crawford. Now, Mr. Crawford was the first African-American attorney for the most part here in the city of Mobile, but he was also the first attorney to open an integrated law firm. So he had multi-races of people within his firm, as well as religions and cultures. He worked with Jewish attorneys, he worked with white attorneys, and of course, he worked with African-American attorneys here in the city of Mobile. Socially, his career started out with him being ostracized. In fact, he couldn't even go to law school in the state of Alabama because at that time we were under the doctrine of Plessy versus Ferguson, what many of us know to be separate but equal. So the state of Alabama would not allow him to attend school at the University of Alabama, but under the doctrine, they had to provide a separate but equal avenue for him to attend school. So interestingly enough, they paid for Mr. Crawford to attend the Brooklyn School of Law in Brooklyn, New York, where he studied, he gained his law degree, and he came back to Mobile and began his practice of law. Many of today's attorneys here in the city of Mobile got their start with Mr. Crawford, namely Merceria Ludgood, who's a current county commissioner, as well as A.J. Cooper, who was the first African-American mayor of Pritchard, Alabama. Greg Harris worked with Mr. Crawford. He's now the city attorney for Bessemer, Alabama. And Michael Figures, who was actually the first Senate pro tem member of the Alabama State Senate. Frankie Field Smith, who was the first African-American female judge in Pritchard, Alabama, and the second woman to graduate from the University of Alabama and pass the Alabama State Bar. So all of those fruits came from the vine of Mr. Vernon Crawford. And of course, we don't know how many fruits that their vines have bared. One of the things that my mother would always tell me was, Only God can count the number of apples in a seed. So plant your seed and see how it grows. Well, our social wellness speaks to that, because in order for our society, for our city, for our state, our nation, and our world to be healthy from a social perspective, we must all respect one another. And that respect has to be earned, but it also has to be reciprocated. So to the top middle of your screen, you'll see an older gentleman in a newspaper who's carrying what looks to be a medical bag. Well, that was Dr. James Alexander Franklin. He was my grandfather, my mother's father. And he graduated from the University of Michigan Medical School in 1914. Now, of course, social aspects were much different at that time, because Dr. Franklin was not allowed to stay in dorms, nor was he allowed to eat at the school cafeteria. He slept on a trunk in the basement of the medical school, and he was never allowed to take in sustenance with his fellow classmates. Yet he finished at the top of his class. In doing such, he moved back to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where he was from, took on a wife, and moved to Evergreen, Alabama. We're talking about the years of the 19s. In Evergreen, he struck up his first medical practice, ironically, during the heart of the Spanish flu, the first great pandemic here in the United States. Well, at that time, everything was completely segregated, especially in lower Alabama. And being that people were dying left and right of the flu, Dr. Franklin figured out that much of the reason that people were dying was because they were being closed up and they were not being allowed to have fresh air. Now, we all know today, in light of last year's pandemic, that one of the best things that you could do was be to get outside and to get fresh air. Well, Dr. Franklin figured that out in the 19s. And so people began to survive the Spanish flu that he treated. Well, a farmer in the community of Evergreen, whose wife was deathly ill and they were white, heard this and got Dr. Franklin to come and treat her. And certainly she got better, she got well, and Dr. Franklin had been recognized for saving the life of a white woman. Well, the farmer went to the townspeople and he said, listen, we don't have to die of this disease. There's a doctor who can heal us. When the townspeople found out that Dr. Franklin was that doctor, they actually came to kill him, because no matter what you did or who you were back in those days, if an African-American person, a man, touched a white woman, it was punishable by death. So the farmer hurried him out of the town. He actually boarded the train and came to Mobile, Alabama. He got off in Plateau, Alabama, which many of us now know as Africatown. He actually treated the Clotilda Africans for many, many years subsequent to that. The Africans who had been illegally kidnapped and brought to the United States by Timothy Mayer. He was penniless at the time, but his motto was to never turn away a patient. So by 1954, some 40 years later, there was an article written on him in Ebony magazine entitled "The South's Richest Negro Doctor." Again, another lesson when we talk about social wellness. Treat people as you want to be treated, and riches will come to you. Sometimes it's not necessarily monetary, but it is visited upon you richly just the same. Just so happened, Dr. Franklin received riches in monetary. Dr. Franklin received riches in monetary means as well as social means, because he also started the first graduate chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated here in Mobile, and he was one of 4 founding members of the Mobile Colored Carnival Association here in Mobile, which is now known as the Mobile Area Mardi Gras Association, or MAMGA, and many of us enjoy their parades till this day. So when we talk about social wellness, it's about getting involved. It's about being involved. And one of the greatest ways that any of us can do so is to vote. We have an election that's coming up in August the 24th to be exact, and everybody should get out and vote. Regardless of who you vote for, get out and exercise your vote. It's the social power that we have uniquely within our country. And many have made great sacrifices in order for us to have that power. Now I'm going to talk about my father, who you see over my left shoulder. There's a picture of me unveiling a street sign. His name is James H. Finley. The other picture is a newspaper article of him opening his 4th drugstore in the Happy Hill community. My father went on to open 7 drugstores all total. That one is most intriguing to me because it happened to open on the day that I was born. So in 1965, on February 7th, my father opened his 4th drugstore. Finley's drugstores were the first chain of African-American drugstores in the state of Alabama. But he didn't stop there because he knew that there were social ills within our community. My father and my mother were civil rights activists, and they went on to lead an organization called the Neighborhood Organized Workers. NOW was the acronym that it was known for. They changed the face of Mobile. Prior to their activities, there were no African-American clerks in grocery stores. There were no butchers in grocery stores. There were no salespersons of beer and candy and cigarettes and things of that nature. Only thing African Americans could do within the South was to either be a Pullman porter on a train or to work with the post office. The only other jobs afforded to African Americans were school teachers for women and cleaners for men. Monetary, very low-waged jobs, labor jobs. Well, because of the pressure that the neighborhood organized workers put on both the city of Mobile as well as the businesses throughout Mobile through nonviolent, social, and disobedient civil behavior, things changed. And African Americans began to not only own their own businesses, but also to be able to acquire position in businesses and city government. For the first time in 1974, Mobile sent a delegation to the Alabama State House since Reconstruction. The first state representatives of African American descent went to Montgomery in 1974, due in large part to the work that the neighborhood organized workers did. We got the first assistant manager for the Mobile Municipal Auditorium, which is now the Civic Center, as well as the first board member on that city-owned property. We got the first school board member of African American descent, the first member of the Mobile County Housing Board, all during those times. But it came about as a result of people voting, people participating, and people ensuring that their voices were heard socially. So when we talk about social wellness, the most thing that we can do is to be involved in every level, with every opportunity that we have. Be involved and get others involved. It is of most importance that we do so because it's how our leaders are chosen. And if a group of people realizes that another group of people is not exercising their vote, then they don't feel accountable to those people. Here in Mobile, we are a very diverse city when it comes to the numbers. So we are a 41% white community, 52% African American community, and 7% of other races such as Asians, Hispanics, and Native Americans. So we are a minority city. That's something that needs to be said. I am not advocating that anyone vote for anyone outside of their construct simply because of race, gender, or any other form of separation. What I am advocating is that everyone vote for the best person that they see for the job. The more people that we vote, the greater the choices are that enters into our leadership. I really want to thank the Pure Vine Foundation for heading up this initiative. Thank you so very much. Please continue the great work that you're doing throughout our community, and I'll look forward to speaking with you all again very soon.